Hey guys. Tonight we tumble into a drowsy slice of mythology that, let's be honest, wouldn't make the top 10 in anyone's Pantheon playlist. You're somewhere in rural Greece. The sun's rolled off behind a hill. The cicadas are holding a lazy rhythm, and the sky is the color of very old parchment. There's no war, no heroes, no fiery-eyed monsters. Just you, a cranky goddess, and a donkey with an unfortunate taste for papyrus. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening from the furthest corner tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you trudge along a winding goat path, your sandals unevenly padded with dry dust. Your destination: a village that's so forgettable it's never once been properly recorded on a map. It sits halfway between nowhere and a slightly smaller nowhere. A few stone houses sag into the hillside. A single olive grove creaks in the breeze. And somewhere in the center of it all, there's a donkey with a face like it's been asked to solve a riddle before coffee. Athena's there too. You know Hertha, goddess of wisdom, war, and having very little patience for mortal nonsense. She's just returned from what she calls a failed strategic summit translation, a screaming match with Ares about helmet polishing, and she's taken to wandering again, mumbling about how brilliance is wasted on the Olympians. You trail behind her, mostly because you've learned it's easier than arguing, and then she stops mid-step, right in front of a crooked little shed that may have once been a chicken coop, but now houses of all things a donkey chewing on the corner of a scroll. Not just any scroll. A copy of Homer's Iliad, which probably took some unfortunate village scribe a year to copy by hand. And this donkey is snacking on it like it's a hay-flavored sandwich. You freeze. Athena doesn't. Her eyes narrow. Her fingers twitch. And then, in a moment that defies all divine logic and common sense, she kneels down goddess armor, and Olin says, "Well now, aren't you curious?" You glance at her, then at the donkey. The donkey blinks. Athena folds her arms, stands up slowly, and declares with absolute seriousness, "I shall teach this donkey to read." You don't laugh, you don't even blink, you just nod. Because if you've learned anything in your accidental internship with an Olympian, it's that questioning her mid-whim is like throwing a marble statue into a thunderstorm and hoping it floats. Still, even she seems aware of how ridiculous it sounds. She paces a little, muttering things like redefining cognitive boundaries and undermining anthropocentric intelligence hierarchies. You suspect she's mostly trying to convince herself, and then she does something worse. She turns to you. "You'll help," she says. "Of course you will." The donkey flicks its tail. The breeze carries the scent of olives and old parchment. Somewhere, a cicada stutters, like it just heard something it didn't want to. It's hard to describe the vibe at this moment. It's not exciting, not dreadful either. More like standing on the edge of the world's most unnecessary cliff, staring down into the possibility of absolutely nothing changing, and yet knowing you'll still fall. Athena picks up the chewed bit of scroll and holds it out to the donkey. "Start here," she says, like this is a perfectly normal way to begin a lesson. The donkey bites her sleeve instead. "You don't survive this. Not really. you just comply. A few hours later, the sun's gone full tangerine behind the mountains, and the tiny village begins its evening shift of sleep. But not you. You and Athena are still in that olive grove with a donkey named Largozeus. She named it, said it means broad in some dialect no one speaks any more, trying to figure out if his snorts resemble the Phoenician alphabet. Also find out, after slipping in a pile of what you hope is compost, that the donkey has no patience for vowels. Athena doesn't mind. She sees patterns where there are none, hope where there shouldn't be, and claims even Socrates would have had a rough first week. You just want a nap, a mainstream fact for you to dangle in your mind as you drift. The Greeks did believe animals had forms of divine inspiration. Certain birds, for instance, were seen as signs from the gods. They never tried teaching literacy to livestock though. That part's ... new ... but here you are, brushing donkey spit off your tunic while Athena diagrams phonemes in the dirt, using a twig and the light of a floating, magically suspended acorn lamp. Fringe tidbit: Athena once tried to reinvent the flute, but gave it up because it puffed her cheeks out unattractively. That same woman is now whistling vowels to a quadruped. Historians still argue whether this entire episode, known later in some confused temple carvings as the great reading beast of Attica, was a literal moment in divine experimentation, or just a metaphor for hubris gone gently sideways. You yawn. Athena doesn't notice. She's too busy drawing a rudimentary letter mu in goat milk on a slab of shale. The donkey sniffs it, then licks it, then sits on it, and Athena nods like, this is exactly what she wanted. You lean against an olive tree. The bark scratches your shoulder. The air smells like sleep, heavy and close. And just before your eyes flutter closed, you hear Athena whisper, mostly to herself, one step closer. Closer to what, you don't know. But the donkey sneezes and knocks over a vase. That feels about right. The next morning, you wake to the sound of a donkey braying at the sky like it's been offended by the sunrise. You roll over in the dirt, your back stiff from sleeping beneath a tree, and realize Athena is already up, balancing a scroll on her knee, muttering syllables like she's casting a sleep spell on the alphabet. You're about to groan something, resembling "Why are we doing this?" when she turns her head, almost like she heard the thought and says, "We need guidance." Now, when a goddess says we, it usually means you. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, you're following her through the thorny paths, past the village gardens, past a well that smells faintly of frog, and out toward a hill where an old man lives in what could loosely be described as a temple, but more accurately looks like a very proud compost heap with columns. The Oracle, you've heard of him. Everyone has, not because he's particularly wise, but because he once fell asleep in the middle of predicting a plague and never corrected himself. The town never got the plague, but it did get a bad case of moldy wheat, which some consider the same thing. When you arrive, the Oracle is sitting on a rock, blowing on a bowl of broth like it's his life's purpose. He doesn't look up, doesn't blink, just slurps and hums, as if the entire cosmos revolves around his soup. Athena clears her throat, still nothing. She clears it louder. You cough politely. The donkey witch, she insisted on bringing tries to eat a bit of the Oracle's robe. At last, the old man lifts his head, peers at you with one eye half closed, and says, "That donkey smells of destiny." You blink, Athena's eyebrows lift ever so slightly. She takes that as a good omen. You're not so sure. The oracle sets his soup aside and slowly uncrosses his legs, which sound like two planks of wood being gently cracked. Then he stands taller than you expect and walks over to the donkey. He examines it, circles it once, twice, then sighs deeply and whispers, "Words are not the burden of men alone." Athena lights up. You get a cold sweat. The donkey yawns. The oracle shrugs like he just remembered he left laundry soaking somewhere, and sits back down. "It'll either work," he says, "or it'll be extremely embarrassing. Either way, I'm not canceling lunch." And that's it. That's the great prophecy. No lightning, no divine wind. Just a half sentence and the smell of lentils. On your way back, Athena seems energized. She repeats the oracle's words under her breath like their sacred text, dissecting every syllable. You walk behind her, kicking a pebble that refuses to go in a straight line, thinking about how much easier life was before donkeys and divine experiments. A fact to pin under your pillow. Greek oracles often gave vague prophecies, usually on purpose. Ambiguity was part of the brand. The Oracle of Delphi, for instance, once told a general he would destroy a great empire if he attacked a prediction that came true, except it was his own. As you return to the olive grove, you spot the villagers peeking from behind windows. They've begun to talk. A goddess lingering in their fields, drawing strange symbols, whispering to animals. Rumors sprout faster than spring onions in this place. You hear one woman murmur, "She's trying to marry the donkey." Another man replies, "I thought it was her donkey." You and Athena ignore them, mostly, but as you reach the grove, you notice something strange. On a flat stone near where the donkey slept, someone has etched a crude drawing, a donkey, standing upright, holding a scroll. A child, maybe. Or maybe the oracle again, wandering in dreams with a stick. Either way, it gives you goosebumps in the heat. Athena frowns and erases it with her sandal. "Too early for legends," she says. But you can't help wondering if something's started. Not something important, just weird. A story trying to grow in ground too dry to hold it. That night, Athena works late, laying out scrolls in the dirt, forming makeshift lessons. You help, though you're mostly in charge of keeping the donkey from eating the curriculum. Every time it snorts too hard, she calls it verbal enthusiasm. And just when you think she's finally asleep under the olive tree, she stirs and says, "Did you hear what he said?" You pretend not to, but she says it anyway. He said destiny. Quirky tidbit to chew on. In one lesser-known fragment of Hesiod, there's mention of an animal with wise eyes that speaks once every century, usually to complain about the weather. Scholars dismiss it as poetic license. But maybe, just maybe, it was a donkey with a grudge. Historians still argue whether Athena's wandering phase post-Persian Wars actually happened, or if she was just used as a literary tool for explaining strange village customs like donkey masks in spring festivals. Either way, you're stuck in a town where people now bow to a donkey, just in case. And you're spending your nights trying to keep it from stepping on priceless scrolls. Sleep comes in fragments, and somewhere between dreams, you hear the oracle's words again, drifting on the breeze like soup steam. Words are not the burden of men alone. The donkey snores. Athena murmurs something about diphthongs, And you, utterly exhausted, wonder if this is what wisdom really feels like. Sore feet, goat milk ink stains, and the creeping suspicion that your life is becoming a bedtime story. No one will believe. The sun barely lifts its head when you find yourself once again in that crooked olive grove, swatting away a bee who seems determined to enter your nose. Largos the donkey has managed to wedge himself halfway under a scroll-strewn crate in search of what you assume is a fig someone dropped last night. His tail flicks like it's bored with existence. Athena, however, is vibrating with divine focus. She's gathered a motley collection of scrolls from the nearby temple, or what's left of Etond, assembled them into what she proudly calls the first animal literacy curriculum. You stare at the pile. It's less curriculum and more wildfire risk. These, she says, pointing to a half scroll and a broken pottery shard she's using as a paperweight, are the building blocks of civilization. You squint. That one says fish stew recipe. Athena shrugs. Everyone has to start somewhere. And so begins the first day of structured lessons. You're not sure what teaching a donkey to read should look like, but this doesn't feel promising. Athena draws letters into the dirt with a sharpened stick. Alpha, she says firmly, is the beginning. Largos blinks. She tries again. Alpha. Largos chews the stick. Not a great start. Still, she persists. And you sit on a rock, tasked with organizing scrolls and shooing away the village children who keep sneaking peeks from behind bushes. One of them, a freckled boy named Stellos, whispers, "Is it true the donkey's going to replace the oracle?" You don't answer. Mostly because you don't know any more mainstream fact to tuck into your sleepy brain. The ancient Greeks had no central library system like the Library of Alexandria. Instead, each temple and school had their own, often messy collection scrolls stacked on floors, tucked in amphorae, or tied up with ribbon and forgotten behind statues. Order was more of a suggestion. Athena's library is no different. She's dragged the scrolls into an open grove and spread them out like picnic blankets. Titles include everything from philosophy to weather predictions to oddly detailed instructions for wool dyeing. At one point, Largo steps directly onto a treatise about planetary motion. Athena doesn't even flinch. She pulls out a cracked tile, painted with letters, lines them up in front of the donkey, and starts chanting the alphabet. You join in not because you think it'll help, but because chanting ancient syllables with a sleep-deprived goddess under an olive tree at sunrise is beginning to feel normal. Alpha, beta, gamma. Largos farts. Athena ignores it. You do not still progress inches forward, slowly, painfully. The donkey begins to recognize shapes at least. He seems to pause before stomping on some letters. Athena interprets this as comprehension. You interpret it as indecision. To encourage him, she paints the letters on flat stones with berry juice. It looks like a toddler held a toga party with crayons. Later that day, she decides that breaking into the temple library again is necessary. You protest. Didn't the priest say we couldn't touch the scrolls again? He said I couldn't borrow them, Athena replies. He said nothing about divine appropriation. That's how you end up sneaking into the dustiest corner of a half-collapsed temple, digging through crates marked untranslated and do not remove without priest's consent. You find a whole basket of scrolls bound in green ribbon, that smell faintly of mildew and sea salt. Fringe tidbit. Many ancient scrolls were scented clove, myrrh, even dried orange peel because they were made of organic materials prone to mold. Smarter scribes would perfume their copies to ward off decay. And rats. You wonder if Athena knows this. You also wonder why one scroll has a drawing of what looks like a dancing goat holding a goblet. Back in the grove, Athena unrolls a particularly large scroll written in strange, spiraling letters. This one, she declares, shall be his graduation text. You look at the donkey. He's chewing his own hoof. Athena doesn't seem discouraged. She's already designing what she calls interactive learning tools using sticks, clay discs, and an unfortunate amount of honey. That evening, as the sun slips away and the sky grows lavender and soft, she instructs you to build the first classroom. You protest. It's an olive grove. Yes, she says, spreading her arms wide, a sacred space of growth and snacks. You build a lopsided desk out of crates. Largos refuses to sit behind it. Instead, he stands on top of it, gazing off into the distance like he's having a philosophical moment. Athena looks proud. You're mostly just sticky from the honey. Historians still argue whether any of the ancient animal-centric myth-stalking, lions, prophetic birds, a goat who solved a riddle were based in real ritual practice, or just metaphors layered with wine-soaked storytelling. This donkey experiment definitely falls under the questionable category. Later, as the stars begin to blink alive, Athena stands before the grove like she's addressing a lecture hall. Repeat after me, she commands. She recites the alphabet. You echo it. The donkey lets out a low, extended bray that somehow resembles Eta. Athena gasps. You roll your eyes. Coincidence. She whispers, breakthrough. You whisper, breakdown. But a strange thing does happen. That night, as you curl beneath a tree and the grove settles into its nighttime hum, you dream of letters drifting across the sky like glowing fireflies. They hum and swirl, forming shapes, patterns, then dissolving again. In the dream, the donkey speaks not in words, but in symbols, pictographs. His hooves tap rhythms that become syllables. His breath fogs the air and forms a message. You can't quite read. You wake up with berry stains on your palms and the sound of distant braying echoing through the olive trees. And you wonder again not if it's possible, but if it's already happening. By the next morning, the donkey has gained a reputation. It's not fame, exactly. More like confused notoriety. Word has slinked through the village that Athena is training a beast of burden to become a scholar. And while most people are skeptical, others, especially the more bored ones, are starting to show up with bread in one hand and curiosity in the other. You return from fetching water to find 3 villagers seated on overturned crates like it's a theater matinee. One is knitting. Another has brought wine. The third, a farmer named Pelin, just stares at Largos and mutters, "That donkey is smarter than my cousin. Wouldn't take much." Athena does not seem to mind the attention. If anything, she thrives in it. She's dressed the donkey in a garland of ivy and tied a string of clay alphabet tokens around its neck, like some divine spelling bee contestant. You, meanwhile, are assigned snack duty and scroll preservation. Again, today's lesson is supposed to be about phonemes. You don't fully remember what phonemes are, and you're fairly certain Largos doesn't either. But Athena is undeterred. She draws symbols in the dirt against low, confident strokes, the same few letters over and over. Alpha, delta, mu. She points to each one as she says its name, then waits expectantly. The donkey, for his part, sneezes on mu and wanders toward a bush. Athena frowns. He's regressing, you shrugged. Maybe he's just bored. Athena blinks. Impossible. Language is the pinnacle of divine expression. You point to the donkey, who is now enthusiastically licking a rock. But here's where it gets strange. Because when she draws the letter gamma, Largos stops. He turns, and then almost reluctantly, he steps forward and taps it with his hoof. You and Athena freeze. Again. She whispers. She wipes the letters clean, draws them again, slowly this time. Alpha, nothing. Gamma, tap mu. The donkey yawns. Athena looks like she's about to faint. Did you see that? He recognizes gamma. This is the beginning. This is historic. Mainstream fact. The Greek letter gamma once represented not just the sound G, but also carried mathematical and astronomical significance in later eras. It wasn't just a sound, it was a symbol of structure, a glyph that pointed to systems of logic and motion. To the Greeks, letters weren't arbitrary squiggles. They were ideas. You, on the other hand, are mostly preoccupied with whether the donkey tapped gamma because it smelled like olives. Nonetheless, word spreads fast. By sunset, there are a dozen villagers camped under the olive trees, watching. Someone brings olives and figs. Someone else plays a lyre off-key. Children chant the alphabet in sloppy unison, turning it into a kind of clumsy lullaby. And then, Largos does it again. Gamma. Just gamma. Only gamma. Every time Athena draws it, the donkey taps it. You test it. You sneak gamma into a row of other letters. Largos finds it. Taps it. Athena looks ready to cry. You, however, are suspicious. Maybe he just likes the shape, you suggest, or the sound, or the rhythm, or the fact that, once, when he tapped it, someone gave him a fig. Fringe tidbit: ancient donkey owners often trained their animals with rhythm. Some researchers believe donkeys can remember repetitive beats or gestures for months. There's even a half-preserved vase showing a man clapping at his donkey before a plower, sort of syncopated encouragement. This may be less myth and more neuroscience, hidden in terracotta still. Athena calls it literacy. She gathers everyone together and, in her most theatrical tone, announces, "Today, he speaks through symbol." Pilon raises a hand, so he can read now. Athena lifts a scroll dramatically. He comprehends. The donkey trips over his own hoof. But the villagers love it. They cheer. They start calling Largos the learned one. A girl offers him a daisy crown. The donkey eats it. Even the village priest, who once banned Athena from the temple, stops by that evening with a lantern and a slightly bewildered expression. He watches silently as Athena draws gamma on the stone. Largos approaches, pauses, taps it. The priest says nothing, just rubs his beard and walks away, muttering something about theological implications of alphabetic animals. That night, Athena cannot sleep. She paces by the fire, scrawling letters in the ash, whispering ideas like pattern retention and symbolic memory. She's talking to herself, but you stay awake anyway, in case she decides to rope you into midnight donkey exams. Historians still argue whether divine interactions with animals were symbolic in Greek literature or literal accounts of ritualistic practice. Some say the gods used animals as metaphors. Others argue there were cults devoted to communicating with beasts, especially in fringe hill regions like this one, you're beginning to suspect that this entire village might have accidentally started one. And the weirdest part, you kind of don't hate it. There's something peaceful about the rhythm of it all. The cadence of repetition. The way the villagers now hum letters like hymns. The smell of crushed olives. The dim, steady lantern light flickering through the grove. The soft bray of Largos, as he dreams of Gamma. And in that moment, just before sleep pulls you under, you wonder what would happen if he tapped Beta tomorrow. You hope he doesn't. You don't think the village is ready. You should have known. Zeus would hear about it. Nothing stays quiet forever on Olympus. Especially not when Athena is involved. Especially not when that involvement includes public praise, minor village worship, and whispered declarations that a donkey is now a keeper of divine script. So, you're not even that surprised when a thundercloud rolls in on an otherwise blue morning, perfectly round, dramatically loud, and glowing slightly at the edges, like someone left the lightning on too long. The villagers scatter. Athena doesn't flinch. She's in the middle of a grammar chant, encouraging Largos to snort out a plausible theta. She looks up only when the cloud parts and Zeus descends in full storm-dad glory. Toga freshly pressed, beard suspiciously symmetrical. He lands with a clap of unnecessary thunder and glares at Athena, a donkey. He says, pointing a finger like it's a javelin of sarcasm. Really? Athena stands her ground. Yes, a donkey. He recognizes characters. He taps specific symbols. He responds to structured rhythm. We are building bridges between species. Zeus picks up a scroll from the ground, sniffs it like it might be poisoned, then eyes Largos, who is currently attempting to sit like a human. The god frowns. He looks like he ate a thesaurus and regretted it. Largos brays in what might be defiance. Or indigestion. You try to stay out of it, of course. Just a mortal. Just the assistant. But Zeus notices you anyway. You're the one watching all this. You nod nervously, taking notes. Mostly cleaning up, you mumble. He shrugs. Fair still. He turns back to Athena, and his tone changes. Not angry exactly, just bored. Like this isn't even worthy of a smiting. You've got until the next moon cycle, he says, yawning mid-sentence. Prove to Olympus that this mule can muse. If he can't read aloud by then, I'm putting you on scroll copying duty for a decade. Athena scowls. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, Zeus grins. You know how dull it is to copy the catalog of ships 10,000 times. Very mainstream fact. The catalog of ships is a famously dry section of the Iliad, listing all the Greek contingents and their numbers. Historians agree it's vital for understanding Bronze Age alliances, but most readers skip it. Imagine having to handwrite it in ink. For 10 years, Athena, of course, accepts the challenge. Publicly, loudly. Zeus leaves in a puff of smug wind, muttering something about needing a snack and a new thunderbolt. You and Athena stand in the grove, watching the cloud drift back toward Olympus. Largos chews on his ivy necklace. You didn't have to antagonize him, you say. Athena doesn't reply. she just kneels beside the donkey and whispers, "It's time to accelerate." You're afraid she's going to start using flashcards. You are not wrong. That afternoon, she unveils her Tier 2 curriculum. It includes painted tokens, sound repetition, vowel calandresponse, and a training chant that resembles a lullaby shouted backward through a vase. There's even a game she calls Pick the Particle, where Largos is supposed to stomp on the correct grammatical connector and, or, but, yet. He mostly stomps on the snack pile. Athena interprets that as choosing yet. She's becoming a little too invested. Meanwhile, you begin to keep your own records notes on Largo's reactions, which letters he ignores, which ones he steps on, which ones he attempts to eat. It's not science, but it's something, maybe. And that's when the oddest thing happens. That night, after most of the villagers have returned home, and the grove has gone quiet, except for crickets, and the occasional owl, Largos does something peculiar. He walks up to a scattered pile of training tokens, noses aside 3 of them, and taps 2 with his hoof. Athena, who was halfway through designing a syllable staircase with flat stones, freezes. You walk over, you look at the tokens. Day. Read, moo and new. No berries, no figs. No encouragement, just choice. Athena slowly breathes in. He's selecting. You squint. That could have been random. But your voice falters. Because something in the way he moved deliberate, unhurried, feels different. Fringe tidbits. Some modern animal behaviorists believe certain species, including donkeys, can demonstrate what's called symbolic interaction. Not quite reading, but something adjacent. Something that resembles choice based on visual or spatial patterns. Historians still argue whether examples of trained animals in antiquity like dancing bears, flute-playing birds, or even staged prophetic dogs were true cognitive breakthroughs or just elaborate conditioning masked as miracles. Athena now believes she's bridging that gap, not through tricks, but through divine intervention and persistence. By the 3rd night, post-Seuss visit, she's implemented a full-day schedule. Morning vowel exercises, midday symbol matching, evening recitation, late evening inspirational stories. About heroic letter learners, she makes them up. The villagers start referring to you and Athena as the tutors. Someone knits Largos a tiny scroll-shaped hat. You don't let him wear it. He tries to eat it anyway, and all the while, the moon creeps higher in the sky. The deadline draws closer. The donkey, remarkably, seems calmer, focused even. He stops, stomping on everything indiscriminately. He begins tapping, then waiting, as if expecting your reaction. You wonder if he's learning. Or if you're all just dreaming the same dream at once. That night, you fall asleep beside the scroll pile, face tilted to the stars, listening to Athena mutter letters in her sleep. Somewhere near your feet, the donkey is breathing slow and steady, and just before you drift off, you imagine what it might sound like if he spoke not a word, not a sentence, just one letter. Clear. Certain. And real. The morning of the moon cycle arrives too quickly. The air feels different, tinged with anticipation, like the village itself is holding its breath. The sky is a strange shade of violet, as though it knows something is about to change. Even the olive trees seem to lean in, closer to the ground, as if eavesdropping on the gathering storm of expectations. Athena is already pacing. You can hear her muttering through the grove, words spiraling through the morning fog like whispers in a dream. She's preparing for the final lesson, the one that will determine whether Largos will rise to the challenge or fall short. And the weight of it is inescapable. You don't need to be an expert in Greek myths to know that the gods rarely keep their promises. Olympus runs on whims and capriciousness, and Zeus' decree was final. Read aloud, or face the consequences. You glance at the grove. Largos is chewing on a chunk of bark, like he's oblivious to the pressure mounting around him. Maybe he doesn't feel it. Maybe all he understands is the rhythm of the alphabet, the steady pulse of the syllables that Athena has drilled into his very bones that the villagers have gathered. The children are standing in a circle near the olive tree, eyes wide with wonder, as if the spectacle of a donkey reading isn't just a lesson, it's a glimpse into a divine moment. They're ready for something miraculous. And you're not so sure. Still, you stand there. As Athena prepares for the grand finale, she's armed with an ancient scroll. It's parchment worn but sturdy. It's one of the oldest scrolls she could find, the Iliad, written in a hand so ancient that the ink almost looks like it has faded into legend itself. She spreads it on a stone, carefully smoothing out the creases. Largos, she says, her voice firm but gentle, this is your moment. You have to admit, there's a kind of beauty to the moment. The light catches her hair, turning it to gold, and her eyes shine with an intensity that is both divine and vulnerable. In this grove, surrounded by the whispers of the gods, she's more than just Athena, the goddess of wisdom. She's a teacher, a mentor, standing at the edge of history, hoping against reason that this donkey will speak. Largos, she repeats, softer this time. Read. The donkey pauses mid-chew, and for a long moment, it feels like time has stopped. The air thickens, and for a heartbeat the world holds its breath. Then, Largos moves. His hoof taps the first line of the scroll. You hold your own breath, Athena. Hands tremble slightly as she watches, her gaze fixed on the donkey. You wonder if she's praying to the gods for some kind of sign, some proof that her faith in this bizarre experiment wasn't in vain. And then, Largos does something that stops everyone in their tracks. He taps again, deliberately, this time, on the next line. And then finally, he lifts his head, lets out a soft bray, and takes a step back, looking directly at Athena, as if expecting her to read aloud what he has just pointed to. It's not speech. It's not perfect comprehension, but it's more than you or anyone else expected. Athena exhales sharply, her eyes wide. She's not sure whether to laugh or cry. The villagers stare, mouths agape. Even the children are frozen, their gazes fixed on the donkey like he's the key to a long-forgotten secret. You take a step forward. You glance at the scroll. The symbols, although ancient, are unmistakable. It's the first line of the Iliad. Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles. Largos has tapped the beginning of a story, a tale of rage, honor, and fate that has been passed down for centuries. It's not a word-for-word reading, but it's as close as any mortal or donkey could get. Athena breathes a laugh, almost choked, and drops to her knees before the donkey. You did it. You can't help but smile. It's absurd. It's impossible. And yet, it's real. For all the myths, all the gods, and all the improbable moments that make up the world, this moment feels like the most impossible of them all, and yet, it happened. The villagers erupt into applause, and the children rush forward, chanting Largo's name like he's a hero who's returned from a great battle. The learned one, they cheer. The sage of the grove. You stand back and watch as Athena accepts their praise with a quiet smile, her eyes never leaving Largo's. He's standing there, hooves planted firmly in the dirt, as though he's always known he had this power within him. You take a deep breath. You feel lighter, almost giddy, as if you've just witnessed something that was impossible and yet undeniable. And then, something even stranger happens, as the villagers begin to leave. Still murmuring with excitement, you glance at Athena, who's standing with her hands clasped together in front of her chest, eyes closed in quiet gratitude. Largo's ambles toward you. He's slow, thoughtful, and then without warning he places his hoof on your foot. You look down, a little startled. But then, just as quickly, he takes it off and walks away. Back toward the grove, Athena watches the entire exchange and smiles softly. What was that, you ask? His thanks, she says simply. I think he knows what he's accomplished. You laugh. It's ridiculous. It's all utterly absurd, but somehow, it feels real. In the quiet of the grove, with the light dimming around you, it feels like you've just witnessed a quiet miracle. The wind picks up, rustling the leaves of the olive trees. The air has shifted calmer now, as if even the gods are taking a moment to catch their breath. You're not sure where this story will end or if it even has an ending. Maybe it'll go down in myth. Maybe the gods will forget about it in a century or two. Maybe the villagers will tell their children that once there was a donkey who could read, and that's all the history they need. But for tonight, at least, you can rest easy knowing that, for a brief moment, the impossible was possible, and the stars above, like the scrolls of old, will never forget. The moon hangs low over the olive grove, its light spilling over the stones like silver dust. The night feels somehow different now. It's no longer just an ordinary evening. The stars, though distant, seem closer, as if they, too, are watching this strange unfolding of events. Largos, having been showered with the village's blessings, seems to be basking in his newfound fame. He's lying on the soft earth now, his head resting on his hooves, looking, dare you say it, content. Athena, ever the observer, is crouched by his side, her fingers brushing over the symbols she's etched into the dirt. It's the same alphabet, the same shapes, but now there's something reverent in her touch. The evening has settled into a quiet lull, and you're left with a strange sense of calm, like everything has fallen into its proper place. The villagers have long since returned to their homes, their chatter fading into the distance, but you and Athena remain, sitting together in the stillness. There's no need to speak. The weight of the moment is enough to fill the silence. You glance at Athena, who's staring out into the grove, her eyes lost in thought. She's not the same goddess who stormed into this village with her grand idea. The Athena before you now is reflective, quieter, almost humbled by the journey this donkey has taken her on. You know, she says softly, breaking the silence, I never thought it would go this far. You blink, not entirely sure what she means. What do you mean? She smiles faintly, her eyes still focused on the moon. I thought it would be just a silly experiment, a way to pass the time. I didn't expect, this. She gestures vaguely. At the grove, at Largos, at the village now far in the distance. But sometimes, the gods work in ways we can't predict. Even the smallest creatures can become part of something greater. You lean back against a rock, feeling the coolness of the stone seep into your skin. There's something almost comforting about the quiet, the kind of peace that only comes after something significant has occurred, but before the world wakes up and demands an explanation. You think this is something greater. You ask, your voice barely above a whisper. Athena turns to you, her smile serene. I think it's the beginning of something. What that something is, I don't know yet. But I do know that Largos, this donkey, of all creatures, has shown us that even in the most unexpected places, there can be wisdom. You nod, considering her words. The idea feels strange, almost too simple for the complexity of the world you've just witnessed. But there's a truth to it, a quiet certainty that hums through the air. Maybe that's what this whole journey was about, finding wisdom in places no one would have thought to look. Largos snorts softly beside you, breaking the reverie. He's shifted in his sleep, his head now tilted at an odd angle, his ears twitching every now and then as if responding to some distant sound only he can hear. Do you think he really understands? You ask, your voice curious now. Athena's gaze softens as she watches the donkey. Not in the way we do, but I think he knows more than he's letting on. Sometimes, understanding isn't about reading words or speaking them out loud. It's about knowing what they mean in the heart. You laugh lightly, a breath of air escaping your lungs. It's strange, but somehow, it makes sense. Perhaps this donkey, this peculiar creature that had no business being anything more than a beast of burden, had become a kind of teacher in his own right. He had reminded you, reminded them all, that sometimes the most profound lessons come from the least expected sources. As the night deepens, you feel the first stirrings of sleep tugging at you. You glance at Athena, who's still watching Largos, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. There's a tranquility about her now, a gentleness that wasn't there before. She looks at you, catching your eye, and for a moment, the world seems to fall away. You know, this might be the most ridiculous thing I've ever done, she says, her voice playful now, but I wouldn't change it. You smile, leaning back against the stone, eyes drifting to the sky above. Yeah. You reply, me neither. Oh. In that quiet moment, you realize that this strange little chapter, this absurd, impossible, miraculous moment, will be remembered in the annals of time. Maybe not as a grand myth of epic battles and heroic deeds, but as a quiet story of a goddess, a donkey, and a village that found wisdom in the most unexpected place, as sleep finally claims you. The last thing you hear is the soft bray of Largos, as if he's content with the world as it is, as if he, too, knows that sometimes it's the simplest things that carry the greatest wisdom. And then, as the night fades into the stillness, you drift into the kind of sleep that only comes after a long journey, knowing that, for all the strangeness, the world has somehow made sense, if only for tonight. The next few days blur together in a haze of quiet satisfaction, the kind that lingers after a great storm has passed, leaving behind the soft hum of contentment. The grove feels different now, calmer, almost sacred. It's as if the very air has been touched by something otherworldly, something that even the gods themselves cannot entirely grasp. Twigos, once an ordinary beast of burden, now walks through the grove like a king. He's earned his place here. His steps measured, almost dignified. The villagers no longer look at him with the same confused wonder, they look at him with respect, as if he's a living testament to something greater than themselves. The children follow him around like he's some kind of spiritual guide, and even the elders seem to pause in reverence when he passes by. Athena, of course, takes it all in stride. She's not one to bask in the spotlight, even though the villagers now refer to her as the teacher of the donkey. She's content to remain in the shadows of the grove, watching her creation, her companion, find his place in the world. But for you, it's different. You've seen this story unfold from the very beginning, from the first misstep to the quiet triumph. You've watched as the impossible became possible, as the improbable became fact. And now, as the world continues to spin around you, you can't help but wonder, what comes next? What happens after the story has been told? For the first time, you feel the weight of that question pressing against you. The strange magic of this place, of Athena and Largos, has woven itself into your life in ways you can't fully understand. It's not just the donkey's newfound wisdom that has changed things. It's everything, the way the villagers now see the world, the way Athena sees it, the way you see it. You find yourself sitting in the grove, alone for the first time in days, your back resting against an ancient olive tree. The world around you is still, save for the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. Largos is nearby, grazing peacefully, his coat shining in the soft light of the late afternoon. Athena is off somewhere, no doubt preparing her next lesson, though you're not sure if she's teaching the donkey anymore, if, perhaps, the roles have reversed. Your thoughts are interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. You look up to see Pelon, the farmer, walking toward you with a basket of figs in his hands. He looks at you, raises an eyebrow, and then sits down beside you with a grunt. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? He says, his voice gruff, but not unfriendly. You nod. Yeah, it's something. Pelon takes a bite of a fig, chewing thoughtfully before speaking again. You know, I thought it was all nonsense at first. A donkey reading. Ridiculous. He shakes his head, as if still trying to wrap his mind around it. But now I'm not so sure. You glance at him. You think Largos actually understands. Pelon shrugs. Maybe. Maybe not in the way we think. But he knows something. He's different now, isn't he? You watch Largos for a moment, the donkey still grazing calmly, his movements slow and deliberate. There's something almost regal about the way he carries himself now, something that wasn't there before. I think he's found his place, you say quietly. Pelon nods, his eyes following the donkey. And Athena, has she found hers? The question hangs in the air for a moment, and you find yourself considering it seriously. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, has always been certain of her purpose. But now, it feels like she's begun to question the very thing that brought her here in the first place. She didn't come to the village seeking wisdom from a donkey. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what she's found. Before you can answer, Pelon stands, brushing off his tunic. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The way the gods work. You laugh softly. Yeah, strange. As Pelon walks away, You can't help but feel a deep sense of connection to this place, to Athena, to Largos, to the village that has, in its own way, become part of this strange little myth. The gods may work in mysterious ways, but perhaps their greatest gift to you wasn't the wisdom of Athena or the strange magic of the donkey. It was the understanding that even the most mundane, the most ordinary things in life, have their place in the grand tapestry of the world. As the evening sun begins to dip below the horizon, you see Athena returning, her silhouette framed against the golden light. She looks tired, but satisfied, like someone who has found what they were looking for, if they didn't know it when they started. Is he ready for the next lesson? You ask, standing up. She smiles, the tiredness in her eyes softening. He's always ready, I think. I think it's me who's still learning. You laugh. I think we all are. And in that moment, you realize that the story isn't over. Yet, it may never be over. There will always be something new to learn, some new twist to the tale. And no matter where the journey takes you, no matter how many myths are written, you will always remember this strange, impossible story, the one where a donkey taught a goddess the true meaning of wisdom, the one where the impossible didn't just become possible, it became the truth by the time the festival arrives. The donkey has an entourage. They're not official, mind you. There's no banner, no uniforms. Just a string of devoted children, 2 old women who swear Largos cured their back pain by brushing past them, and a wandering poet who insists on writing every one of the donkey's hoof taps into verse. Athena, meanwhile, has been roped into planning the day's activities. It wasn't her idea. She actually muttered something about how festivals are distractions for mortals with poor attention spans. But the villagers wouldn't take no for an answer. After all, it's not every day a donkey learns to read, or taps sacred epic poetry on command. The celebration, they decided, would be a tribute to wisdom, to teaching, to olives, to Largos of course, and, most unexpectedly, to you. There's even a wreath with your name on it, sort of. It's spelled UO, which you consider an honest effort. The day begins with a parade. A slow one, given the lead walker is a donkey. But the villagers line the path through the grove, throwing flower petals and cheering as if they're watching a hero return from battle. Largos plods along, completely unfazed by the attention. A child runs up to press a scroll into his side. Largos sniffs it, then delicately spits out a fig stem. Athena walks beside him in silence, garbed in a light tunic threaded with silver leaves. For all her reluctance, she carries herself like royalty. You wonder if she's pretending, or if maybe she's just allowing herself to be what the villagers believe she is, divine and unknowable, yet strangely human today. Do I have to make a speech? You whisper, stepping up beside her. She doesn't. Look at you. Yes, and make it short. Any advice? Don't mention Zeus. Fair later. Once the donkey has been properly anointed with olive oil, and someone has attempted to put a laurel crown on his ears, he ate it. The crowd gathers around a small platform built near the grove's edge. Athena gives a brief and surprisingly moving talk about wisdom being found in unlikely places. The villagers nod solemnly. Some of them tear up. Then it's your turn. You step onto the platform, awkwardly holding your speech, which is written on the back of a failed spelling chart. Athena discarded 2 nights ago. You clear your throat. Hey, I'm just the assistant. that gets a laugh. But I guess if this story has taught us anything, it's that sometimes, being just something is more than enough. Just a donkey, just a scroll, just a god in disguise. And all of that turned into this you gesture around at the grove, the olive trees shimmering in the late afternoon light, the villagers smiling up at you, the donkey munching what might be a ceremonial garland. This really weird, wonderful, unforgettable thing. You pause, then add, also, he only tapped gamma at first because I hid a fig under it. Laughter erupts again. Even Athena grins. Mainstream fact, in ancient Greece, festivals weren't just entertainment, they were essential to public life. From honoring gods like Dionysus and Apollo to celebrating harvests or New Year's, festivals were a community glue. They involved music, poetry, sacrifices, and yes, competitions, even for oratory or animal handling. It wasn't unheard of to crown a beast for its symbolic importance. Largos, apparently, is no exception. Fringe tidbit. There is one scratched fragment of an old votive, steely found in a dusty part of Boeotia, that depicts a donkey with a scroll in its mouth. Some believe it was satire. Others claim it was a real offering, made in thanks to a beast that somehow understood the sacred names. Scholars still argue whether it was metaphor, miracle, or just a very expensive joke. The poet predictably recites a few rhyming lines about Gamma, the Great, and the braying of truth. No one listens, but everyone claps politely. By sunset, the grove has transformed into a glowing sanctuary of torchlight and shadows. Tables overflow with bread, honey, grilled fish, and roasted nuts. Someone's brought out a flute, and a low, droning melody filters through the air, setting everyone into a kind of trance state of contentment. Athena sits at the far edge of it all, on a smooth stone bench beneath a fig tree. You join her quietly, both of you watching Largos bask in the attention, snacking beside a pile of scrolls like he's earned the right to be a little smug. I think he likes it, you say. Athena smiles faintly. He's not the only one. You both sit for a while in companionable silence. The firelight flickers against her face, making her look impossibly young and ancient at once. Do you think it'll last? You ask. The reading, the memory, the legend. She shrugs. Probably not. These things rarely do. Time forgets what it cannot reuse. You frown. That's depressing. She turns to you, her gaze gentle. That doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. Historians still argue whether myths like this strange, fleeting, and local ever happened. Some claim they were lost in the folds of time because they lacked grandeur. Others say their quietness was the grandeur. That they were whispered truths, known only to those lucky enough to live them. And maybe that's what this story is. In the end, not a grand epic sung across the seas, but a small, improbable tale about a donkey who learned to listen to letters, and a goddess who learned to be patient, and you who learned that sometimes, the wildest stories start with someone simply saying, "Okay, I'll help." The music slows. The villagers drift off, one by one, their laughter fading into the trees. Largos curls up beneath the teaching stone, tail tucked close, ears flicking at dreamflies, and you lean back, gaze up at the stars, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. The days after the festival feel almost unreal. There's a quiet settling that takes place. The grove has returned to its usual rhythm. the leaves rustling in the breeze, the gentle buzz of cicadas, and the soft thud of Largo's hooves on the earth. But it's not the same. The villagers don't look at the trees the way they did before, and neither do you. There's a strange magic lingering in the air, a subtle hum that you can't quite shake. The grove is no longer just a grove, it's become part of the story. Athena has stopped pacing so much. The urgency in her eyes is gone. She no longer feels like she has something to prove. Instead, she's more reflective, almost at peace. You catch her sometimes, staring at Largos as he sleeps, a faint smile playing on her lips, like she's content with the world as it is. You, on the other hand, still can't quite shake the sense of wonder. It's not just the idea of a donkey. Reading it's the idea that something so simple, so small, could carry so much meaning. Largo's quiet wisdom has, in a way, shifted your perception of everything. Suddenly, the world feels a little more magical, a little more filled with possibility. You sit beneath the olive tree one afternoon, watching the sun dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the grove. Largos is grazing nearby, chewing lazily on some leaves. The sound of his chewing is strangely comforting. There's a steady, almost meditative rhythm to it. Do you ever wonder if we've learned anything, you ask, breaking the silence. Athena, who has been lost in thought, looks over at you. What do you mean? About the story, you say, about everything. It feels like something should come after this. Like the next part of the myth is waiting for us. She tilts her head, considering. Maybe there is no next part. Maybe this is the myth. Maybe it's not about what happens next, but about the moment we're in. You're not sure you agree. It feels too simple, too final. There's always more, isn't there? The world never really stops. Myths always evolve, twist, and grow, don't they? But before you can voice this, there's a soft rustling in the bushes. You look up just in time to see Pelin and a few others from the village approach. They're carrying a basket of figs, a jug of wine, and, inexplicably, a small wooden flute. The poet sent us, Pelin says, with a grin. He's written a new verse about Largos, wants to share it with the grove. You laugh lightly. The poet never misses an opportunity to turn anything into poetry. You glance at Athena, and she gives a resigned but fond smile. I think we're going to hear a lot of verses about Largos. You say let them, Athena replies, her voice soft but warm. This is his myth now, and maybe it's ours too. The villagers settle around the fire pit, and the flute begins to play. Its notes light and playful, echoing through the grove. The poet's voice rises above the music, and for the first time, it doesn't sound so absurd. The words, once ridiculous, now feel like a tribute not just to Largos, but to the story you've all lived. The rhythm of the flute, the warmth of the firelight, and the peaceful presence of the donkey make everything feel complete. The poet speaks of the donkey's wisdom, of how he tapped out letters with his hooves, of how he became a symbol of learning and patience, of quiet strength. And though his words are exaggerated, embellished with flourishes, you find yourself moved by the simplicity of it all, in a way. Largos did become a symbol of wisdom, of potential, of the unexpected. Truths that lie hidden in the most ordinary places. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes a myth. The stories we tell. The lessons we carry with us. the way we pass them down to others, no matter how small or strange, as the evening wears on. You realize something you hadn't before. The myth doesn't need to end. It doesn't have to be grand or legendary. It's enough that it exists here, now, in this moment, with all of you. Largos the donkey, the goddess, the villagers, the poet, all of you, woven together by this strange, impossible story. The stars begin to twinkle above the grove, and the firelight flickers in the cool night air. The flute's melody softens, becoming a lullaby, and the villagers start to drift off to their homes, still humming the words of the poet's song. Athena stands beside you, and for the first time in a long while, there's no hurry in her steps. She's not rushing to write the next chapter or solve the next puzzle. She's simply present. You know, she says, turning to you, I think I'm starting to understand something. What's that? You ask. She looks at you, a gentle smile playing on her lips. That sometimes, the greatest lessons aren't about knowing everything. They're about accepting that there's still so much more to discover. You nod, feeling the weight of her words settle in your chest. You do understand. Maybe that's the real lesson of all of this. It's not the myth that defines us. It's the journey, the small, quiet steps that lead us to moments of understanding, the unexpected places where wisdom is found. And as you watch the last of the villagers disappear into the night, you realize that this is the beginning of something else entirely. Not the end of a myth, but the start of a new chapter. One where the story doesn't stop. It just continues, whispered on the wind, carried through time, and passed on to whoever is willing to listen. And somewhere, out there, a donkey will keep tapping. The days that follow are both ordinary and extraordinary, and you begin to realize that the line between the two has blurred beyond recognition. The village has returned to its usual rhythm. The crops are harvested, the animals fed, and the gossip flows just as freely as the wine at the festival. But beneath it all, there's an unspoken shift, a quiet undercurrent that hums through everything. The villagers speak in hushed tones about the donkey that read, and though the myth is slowly fading into the background, its imprint is undeniable. Largo's presence is strange. Serene wisdom's woven into the fabric of the village now. You find yourself walking to the grove each day, feeling as though you're returning to a place that's always been there, yet always changing. The stones beneath your feet are familiar, but the air around them feels somehow different. It's like the world has shifted imperceptibly, and you're just noticing it now. You notice Athena more, too. She's still a goddess, of course. Still wise, still a force to be reckoned with. But there's a softness in her now, a quiet contentment that wasn't there before. She spends her days in the grove with Largos, teaching him, learning from him, as though their roles have become entwined. It's not often that you see them together, in silence when they're not engaged in lessons or discussions. They simply exist side by side, a kind of peaceful companionship that's hard to put into words. Largo's presence has brought a kind of balance, a calmness that seems to radiate from the grove itself. It's not a perfect peace, of course, but it's a peace that feels earned, the kind that comes from understanding something larger than yourself. You catch yourself wondering how the gods feel about all of this. Olympus must be watching. Surely they are. One afternoon, while Athena is lost in thought beneath the fig tree, you approach her, a bit hesitant. Do you think Zeus is still watching? She looks up from the scroll she's been absently scribbling on her brow, furrowing slightly. Zeus, you nod. Yeah, you know the whole thing with Largos. He did say there'd be consequences if things didn't go according to plan. Athena pauses, her gaze thoughtful. Do you really think that matters? You blink. What do you mean? He gestures vaguely toward the village, toward the grove, as if the whole scene before him is some kind of riddle. The festival's over, the poet's gone. The villagers have moved on to the next thing. But what happens when we forget? Let the question sit there for a moment. You're not sure how to answer. How can you answer such a big question, when all you've really seen is a donkey tapping out cymbals and a goddess learning to be patient? I guess, you say slowly, maybe we don't forget. Maybe we just hold on to the lesson, even if it fades into the background. Pelin hums thoughtfully, staring off into the distance. Maybe, but I think there's something to be said for keeping the story alive, even when it's not the focus anymore. You think about this for a moment. You think we should keep talking about it. I think we should keep living it. Pelin says with a shrug, pushing a fig toward you. Maybe it's not about remembering every detail, but it's about remembering the feeling of it, the way it changed us. The words settle in your chest like a quiet revelation. It's not about the myth itself. It's about what it did to them, to you, to the village. The story of Largos isn't one that's meant to be endlessly retold in grandiose terms. It's meant to live on in the small, everyday moments, the way the villagers now treat the grove with reverence, the way Athena watches over Largos, the way you approach the world with a little more curiosity and wonder than before. Later, as the sun dips below the horizon, you stand beside Athena, watching Largos settle in for the night. The stars are already beginning to emerge, twinkling softly in the growing darkness. You were right, you say quietly, turning to her. This was never about the myth. It was about the journey. Athena glances at you, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I think you've learned more than you realize. You smile back, and for the first time in a long while, you feel truly at peace with the world around you. There's no need for grand conclusions, no need for finality. The journey continues, just as it always has, and sometimes, the stories we remember aren't the ones with the loudest voices, they are the quiet, lingering ones. The ones that are told through gestures, through understanding, through a donkey's gentle tap on a scroll. And in that silence, the myth continues. The seasons shift, as they always do, and the grove begins to feel the weight of the changing air. The breeze carries the scent of ripe figs, and the days grow shorter, the golden light of the afternoon giving way to longer shadows. It's the time when everything starts to slow down, preparing for the long rest of winter, but the grove, it seems, is still buzzing with the quiet hum of life. Largos, as always, is at the center of it. He's not the same donkey who once wandered through the village, unnoticed and unremarkable. No, now he's a part of the landscape itself, a living legend embedded in the soil of this place. He's more than a pet, more than a creature of burden, he's an icon. And no one here will ever forget the day he tapped out the ancient verses. You've found your own rhythm, too. The initial novelty of the story has faded into something more lasting. You've grown into your place in this village, helping where you can, always a part of the quiet conversation about the donkey who read and the goddess who learned. It's not an extraordinary life by the world's standards, but it feels extraordinary in its simplicity. You notice more of the little things now, like how Athena has begun to relax into her role. She spends more time with the villagers, teaching them the way of wisdom without the pretense of divinity. She's not trying to impose her knowledge anymore. Instead, she listens, and in listening, she offers something more valuable than any lesson she could have taught before. Even the poet, though he still writes exaggerated verses about Largo's feats, has started to focus on the quieter moments, the ones that seem insignificant at first, but hold the weight of something deeper. He no longer writes for glory, but for the sake of preserving the essence of what was learned in this grove. One evening, as you sit by the fire with Athena, Largo's resting nearby, you realize that something profound has happened in the time since that first lesson. It's not just the events that have changed, it's how you, and the people around you, see the world now. Do you ever think about how far we've come? You ask, stirring the fire with a stick. Athena looks at you, her face softened by the light of the flames. Of course. But I think I've stopped thinking of it as far. It's more like a steady walk, each step taking us further into understanding. You nod, feeling the truth of her words. The journey didn't happen in one grand, dramatic moment. It happened quietly, slowly, and sometimes in ways that weren't obvious at first. The gods didn't deliver a lightning bolt to change everything. Instead, they gave you the tools to change yourselves. A donkey, a goddess, a village, and you, standing in the middle of it all, learning as you went along. I used to think that wisdom was something to be earned, Athena continues, her voice thoughtful, like it was a prize that could be won, but now I know, it's something we cultivate. You sit in silence for a moment, letting the crackle of the fire fill the space between you. The evening feels peaceful, almost too peaceful for a place with such an unlikely story. I think, you say slowly, the greatest lesson we learned was that even the smallest things matter. Athena looks up at you, her eyes glowing with quiet approval. Yes, exactly that. The silence that follows is comfortable. There's no need to rush to fill it with words. You simply sit, both of you, watching the fire, watching the world around you. The next few days pass without fanfare, as they often do in the quieter months. The village settles into the rhythm of winter, the air crisp and sharp. People spend more time indoors, sharing stories, drinking tea, knitting blankets, for the cold months ahead. But even in the stillness, there's a sense of purpose, of continuity, as though the story of Largos is continuing to weave itself into the fabric of daily life. One morning, as you walk toward the grove, you notice something strange. There's a new addition to the village square. It's a small stone plaque, with an inscription carved into it. You approach, your curiosity piqued, and read the words, "In honor of Largos, the donkey who read, who taught us that wisdom is not found in grand gestures, but in the quiet, steady moments of life." You stand there for a long moment, the words sinking in. It's a simple tribute, but it feels right. The villagers didn't make a statue. They didn't need to. They didn't need a grand gesture. This small, humble stone says it all. As you continue on your way to the grove, you reflect on the meaning of the plaque. It's not just about remembering the myth. It's about remembering what it meant, what it means. That even the smallest acts of wisdom, even the quietest moments, carry weight. That the unexpected can be just as important as the grand. You find Athena standing by the grove's entrance, her gaze turned toward the plaque. She's not surprised, but there's a warmth in her eyes as she sees the tribute. Did you know this was coming? You ask, stepping up beside her. She shakes her head, her lips curling into a smile. No, but I'm glad they did it. I guess it's a reminder that the story doesn't end. You say softly. Athena turns to you, her smile deepening. The story never ends. It just keeps going, like the roots of these trees. You look at the plaque again, the inscription, now seeming like the final piece of the puzzle. Largos may have tapped out the first verse of a myth, but the rest of the story, the real story, will be told by the lives that continue here, in the moments that are too small to be noticed at first. And that's okay. It's more than enough. As the sun begins to set behind the grove, casting a soft glow over the land, you feel at peace. The story will continue, in the whispers of the wind, in the rustling of the leaves, and in the quiet, steady moments that make up a life well lived. Winter is a quiet visitor in the village, though not an unwelcome one. The air is crisp, but the hearths burn bright, and the village feels more like a community now than it ever has. As the frost settles on the olive trees, and the first light dusts the earth with white, something in the grove remains untouched by time. The lessons still linger. It's in the silence, the subtle way the world moves, that you begin to understand the full depth of everything that's happened. Nothing is ever truly gone. Even the most fleeting of moments has a way of finding its place, like seeds carried on the wind, waiting to bloom when the time is right. Largos still leads the way, though he's no longer the focal point he once was. He's a quiet presence, the steady heartbeat of the grove. You've come to learn that wisdom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet tap of a hoof, the delicate rustle of a scroll, the sound of a lesson being passed down in the simplest of ways. And yet, there are moments small and fleeting that remind you of just how extraordinary this whole thing was. Like when a child runs up to you in the market, eyes wide with wonder, asking if it's true that Largos can read. Or when a new villager, fresh from a distant land, looks around in confusion, wondering if there's a story behind the strange donkey with his sacred scrolls. You've heard of the donkey. You ask one afternoon, chuckling as the newcomer squints at you in disbelief. Oh, I've heard. But I didn't expect ... this. The newcomer gestures to the grove, eyes wide as they take in the sight of Largos munching on a pile of figs, while Athena observes him from a distance, scribbling notes as if he were her student. That's the story, you say simply. You'll find that not everything here makes sense at first, but if you stick around, you might just understand. There's a quiet satisfaction in that, how the myth, now so deeply embedded in the village's daily life, has taken on a life of its own. It's no longer something people talk about with wonder and awe. It's part of the rhythm of the place. A story that's no longer just told, it's lived. Athena, as always, remains an enigma to the villagers. Some still believe she's a goddess in disguise, and why not? She's still the one who taught a donkey to read, the one who turned a simple village into a place of legend. But you know the truth, she's something else. Something human, something real. A goddess who learned how to be ordinary, how to embrace the everyday moments that make life extraordinary. You find her one afternoon, sitting beneath the tree, staring at a scroll she's been working on for weeks. The words are there: no more symbols, no more tapping, just letters, arranged in perfect order. She looks up as you approach, and for the first time in a long while, she looks ... uncertain. I don't know what to write next, she admits. Softly, her voice carrying the weight of something deeper than just writer's block. You sit beside her, a bit surprised by her vulnerability. What do you mean? I thought I had it all figured out, she says, the quiet frustration evident in her voice. The lesson, the myth. But now I feel like I've missed something. Like there's something more to all of this. You look at the scroll in her hands, the neat rows of letters. Maybe it's not about what you write next. Maybe it's about what you've already written. She glances at you, her eyes searching, and then something softens in her gaze. You're right. It's not about the next lesson. It's about understanding that the story, the real story ... never stops. You both sit in silence for a while, watching the frost creep across the ground. The grove is quiet, save for the occasional rustle of Largos as he moves through the trees. He's still the same donkey, still tapping his hooves in the soft earth as if the world doesn't need anything more than this. It's almost as if he's teaching you both, just by being. It's strange. But after all this time, the idea of the myth doesn't seem so important anymore. Not in the way it once did. The legend of Largos the donkey who read has become something more profound. It's a reminder that there's no end, no finality to the stories that matter. They grow, change, and adapt to the seasons of life. They're not defined by the grand gestures or the loud proclamations, but by the quiet moments where meaning is found. Do you ever wish it had been different? You ask, watching Largos roll in the snow, clearly enjoying himself. Athena shakes her head. No, it's perfect, the way it is. The way it always was supposed to be. You nod, understanding what she means. There's nothing to chase anymore. No grand revelation to uncover. This story was never about the destination. It was about the journey. About learning to listen to the small, unspoken lessons that have always been here, quietly unfolding. And with that understanding, you realize that you've been a part of something much bigger than you ever anticipated. Something that won't be forgotten, but will be passed down in its own time, in its own way. Not with fanfare or grandiose gestures, but in the simple, steady pace of life. The story isn't over. It will never be over, because some myths, like Largos, are meant to last not in the minds of those who tell them, but in the hearts of those who live them. And as you stand in the grove, watching the stars slowly appear in the evening sky, you can feel it. This myth, this story, will live on in you. In Athena, in Largos, in the village. In the quiet moments that make life extraordinary. As the months slip by, the rhythm of the seasons begins to feel almost eternal, as though time itself has settled into a gentler pace. The village, nestled against the edge of the grove, now feels inseparable from the land. The wind carries the scent of salt from the distant sea, mingling with the ever-present perfume of figs and olives. The days, shorter now, pass quietly. The quietude only broken by the low murmur of the village and the soft tap of Largos' hooves against the earth. It's strange, isn't it? how the world can feel so unchanged, yet so utterly transformed. The events of the past year seem like a dream, a moment suspended in time. But when you walk through the village, when you sit beneath the ancient olive trees, you realize that the story is still unfolding. Largos is still Largos, no different in his habits, no less profound in his wisdom. He still taps at the scrolls, still sits under the fig tree as if he's waiting for the world to catch up. And Athena is no longer the goddess who once gripped her knowledge like a weapon. She's become something more human, more approachable, and more attuned to the ebb and flow of life. The villagers no longer see her as an enigmatic figure. They've begun to recognize her as a teacher, a guide, and above all, a friend. One day, as you sit by the fire, the flickering light casting soft shadows against the stone walls, you catch sight of her again. She's sitting alone, her legs stretched out before her, looking at the stars that are beginning to make their nightly appearance. There's no hurry in her movements, no tension in the air. It's a quiet, peaceful evening. I was thinking, she begins, her voice soft, as she breaks the silence, about the way we see the world. You glance over at her, sensing there's more to her words. What do you mean? She gestures toward the grove, where Largos is grazing peacefully. When we first arrived, I thought wisdom could be found in the grand moments, in the thunderclaps, in the great debates, in the drama of it all. But now, I see, it's in the stillness, the quiet moments, the unspoken truths. You nod, understanding exactly what she means. It's been that way all along, hasn't it? The story of Largos wasn't about the grand gestures. It wasn't about the mythological spectacle that so many expected. It was about the quiet, unassuming acts of wisdom that can slip by unnoticed if you're not paying attention. A donkey tapping out letters, a goddess learning to listen, a village coming together to embrace the strange, the impossible, and make it part of their lives. The sky above you is wide and full of stars, and you feel a connection to the world in a way you hadn't before. This place, this moment, it's not about what comes next. It's about what's already here. As Athena continues to gaze at the sky, you remember the way she once spoke about the future with certainty, with purpose. But now, it's different. Now, it's about embracing the unknown with open arms. Understanding that sometimes, not knowing is the most powerful thing of all. I never thought I'd say this, she says, a smile tugging at her lips. But I think I've finally understood that there's no perfect ending to this story. You raise an eyebrow. What do you mean? She looks at you, her eyes sparkling with something that feels almost mischievous. I spent so much time thinking that there had to be a conclusion, a final chapter, something to wrap it all up neatly. But the truth is, the myth doesn't end. It just continues. In every person who believes in it, in every moment where the story lives on, you smile, feeling a sense of calm wash over you. I think I understand. The story isn't about how it ends. It's about how it's lived. Athena's smile deepens, and she nods. Exactly, it's in the small, quiet ways that the myth persists. In the way the villagers now speak of Largos, not as a miracle, but as a part of their everyday lives. It's in the lessons we learned without even realizing we were learning them. The story continues in each of us, in the way we see the world, in the way we pass it on. You look out at the grove, where Largos is now lying down, his eyes closed. as if he's resting after a long day of teaching. There's something peaceful in the way he's become part of the land, part of the cycle of life here. And Athena, with her newfound understanding, is now part of that cycle too. I think you're right, you say softly. The story doesn't need an ending, it just needs to be lived. Athena turns her gaze back to the stars, and for a moment, it feels as though the world itself is holding its breath. There's no pressure to rush, no need to define every moment, just an understanding that it's enough to be. The fire crackles beside you, casting warm light over your faces. The air is cool, but not cold, and the stars seem to shimmer a little more brightly, as if they're listening to the quiet conversation between you and the goddess. And in that moment, you realize that the myth, the legend, doesn't need to be told over and over. It doesn't need to be passed down in grand retelling. It's lived in the small moments, in the quiet, steady persistence of life. It's in the way the world continues to turn, the way wisdom is found in unexpected places, and in the simple, gentle rhythm of the seasons. As the night deepens, you sit with Athena in peaceful silence, the grove around you quiet and alive with its own soft rhythms. Largos continues to rest, content and unbothered by the world's expectations. He's a part of something bigger now, but he doesn't know it. He doesn't need to. And neither do you. The story will live on, not because it's been written, but because it's been experienced. It's been felt, in the hearts of those who've witnessed it. In the lives that continue to unfold beneath the olive trees, beneath the stars, and that, you realize, is enough. Spring arrives with a soft breath, unfurling the land beneath its touch. The trees, once bare and stoic against the cold winter, begin to bud, and the village awakens to a new cycle of life. The air smells of fresh earth and blossoming flowers, and every corner of the grove feels alive, as though the earth itself is exhaling after a long, quiet slumber. You've come to appreciate these quiet transitions, these moments when the world slowly shifts without fanfare, when life continues without anyone needing to announce it. The grove, the village, and everything within it. Largos, Athena, the villagers move, as they always have, in their quiet, steady dance. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced. It's a rhythm that feels like a secret, a pattern only the land knows, and those who've lived here understand. Largos, of course, is still the heart of it all, even if the legend of the donkey who read has become just another part of the landscape. He's not an ancient hero or a god in disguise, but a humble presence, a reminder that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes in the simplest forms. He spends his days tapping at scrolls, grazing lazily beneath the shade of olive trees, and looking at the world as if it's always been his classroom. One afternoon, as you sit beneath the fig tree, the sun dappled through the leaves, you reflect on everything that has unfolded. It's been a year since the festival, since Largos first tapped those fateful cymbals. And though the world hasn't exactly changed in the grand sense, something about it feels richer, fuller. The stories that were once told in awe have become part of the quiet landscape, woven into the fabric of the village and its people. Athena, who has grown so much in the past year, sits beside you, the scroll she's been working on for weeks now, forgotten, at her side. She's looking out at Largos, her expression soft. There's no tension in her, No rush to solve the next puzzle. Just a peaceful acceptance of what is. I think I understand it now, she says, her voice quiet but steady, as if she's been mulling it over for some time. You look at her, intrigued. Understand what? She smiles, turning her gaze toward you. The myth, the lesson. It was never about the end. It was about living in the moment, and seeing the world through new eyes. We spent so much time trying to control everything, to create something grand, but the real story was in the quiet moments. You think about that for a moment, and it clicks. Everything that happened, the donkey, the festival, the lessons learned, was never about a single grand moment of glory. It was about the slow unfolding of life, about the unexpected and the small acts that ripple out in ways you can't predict. It was about the way Largos, with his gentle wisdom, showed you that even the most unlikely sources could offer the greatest lessons. The firelight begins to flicker in the distance, where the village gathers for the evening meal. It's a familiar sight, a comforting one. The voices of the villagers rise and fall in conversation. The clink of cups, the laughter that rises from the heart of the village. You know that, for all the quiet wisdom that has been passed through the grove, this is where it truly lives. In the daily lives of the people who have learned from it, who carry the story with them, even without realizing it. Do you ever wonder, you ask Athena, your voice almost a whisper, if Largos ever knew what he was doing? She laughs softly. The sound like wind through the leaves. No, I think he just was. And that was enough. He didn't need to understand the lesson. He just had to live it. You nod, understanding. That's the way of it, isn't it? We're all just living the story without always knowing it. The myth of Largos is not something to be retold in grand speeches or endless poems. It's something that's been passed through time in the simplest, quietest ways, through the actions of those who believed, and through the lives that were changed without fanfare. As you sit there beneath the fig tree, you realize that this, too, is the myth, this quiet moment, this simple understanding. The story isn't finished, not because it hasn't been told enough times, but because it continues in every action, every moment, and every person who remembers the lesson without needing to know the details. You look up at the sky, where the stars begin to emerge, shining quietly above the grove. And you know in that moment that the story will never truly end. It doesn't need to. The story of Largos the donkey who read will continue, not because it is told, but because it is lived. And in that living, it will always be enough. The firelight flickers, the voices from the village grow softer, and the stars above seem to watch over you, as they have watched over all those who have come before. Maybe this is the perfect ending. You say softly, more to yourself than to Athena. She smiles, a serene, knowing smile. Maybe it's not the end at all. Maybe it's just the beginning of another story. And with that, you feel it, the quiet, contented peace that comes from knowing that the greatest myths are those we carry with us, lived every day, in the small moments, in the lessons we learn when we least expect them. As the night deepens and the grove settles into its evening rhythm, you close your eyes, content to simply be a part of it all. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear as always, tapping his hooves, teaching the world in his own way. you.